Good to see you. Well, it's good for you to see me. I can't see you, but here's stage one of our trying to go a little bit liver than we have been before. So here we are, Easter Sunday, and the message this morning. I want to talk to you about Easter eggs. But first, let's think about the road to Emmaus. Not long after Jesus rose from the dead, two of his followers were walking down the road to Emmaus. And they were so busy talking about everything that at first they didn't see him walking with them, let alone recognize who he is. They're so wrapped up in their own events, they couldn't see Jesus for who he is. It can be the same for us today. We could be so wrapped up in dealing with coronavirus, coming up with ways to manage lockdown, that we forget what day it is, let alone that it's Easter weekend. Most years we're probably out buying chocolate eggs to give to the kids, or arranging to have an Easter egg hunt. But even then, do we ever pause to seek the meaning behind the egg? With all the virus mayhem and the search for chocolate eggs, it's easy to lose sight of the significance behind the fact that it's Resurrection Sunday today. A few years ago, I was getting my hair cut just before Easter, and the barber said to me, "Steve, you work in a church. What's the origin of the Easter egg?" Well, what do eggs have to do with Easter? You go into the shops, there are all sorts of eggs. The mini egg, the Lion Bar egg, the Whisper egg, the caramel egg, the Mars egg. But I've rarely seen a Jesus egg. There is a company that started making Jesus Easter eggs, but most supermarkets don't stock them. And if I looked only at the supermarket shelves, the story behind Easter must be all about a chocolate egg or a chocolate bunny. That's if there's anything on the shelves right now. So when the barber asked me what the origins of the Easter egg were, I confessed that I didn't know. So I went out and did a little digging. Eggs have been around in Christianity for a long time, and Easter eggs have been coloured and decorated for hundreds of years. Back in 1307, in King Edward I's household, there's a record that 18 pence for 450 eggs to be boiled and covered with gold leaf and distributed to the royal household. In the Middle Ages, during the 40 days of Lent, no eggs were eaten at all. It was traditional to use up all your eggs before Lent began. That's where Pancake Day, or Shrove Tuesday as we know it, came from. The day before Ash Wednesday, the day before Lent begins. And so it was during Easter that eating eggs began again after the Lent, or the 40 days of Lent. Eggs were a key ingredient in Easter meals, and they were a prized gift for children and servants. And that's one reason why eggs became associated with Easter. And the other reason is this: in early Christian times, the egg was a symbol of new life, just as a chick might hatch from an egg. In the 18th century, people bought papier-mâché eggs, in which they hid small gifts to give to friends and family. And then come to the 19th century, cardboard eggs were covered with silk or lace or velvet and fastened with ribbons as gifts. Chocolate eggs were made in France and Germany in the early 19th century. And the first chocolate Easter egg in the UK was made by John Cadbury in 1875. The rest, as they say, is history. So chocolate eggs have been around for 250 years or so. Well, I'm sorry to tell you that chocolate misses the whole point of Easter. For Christians, the Easter egg is a reminder of new life in Jesus Christ. Just as the new life of a chick hatches from an egg, so a Christian has new life through the resurrection of Jesus. On Good Friday, Jesus was crucified on a wooden cross by Roman soldiers who knew their job well. There's no doubt that Jesus died on the cross. Jesus' followers took his dead body and placed it in a tomb. It didn't have graves like we do now, so the tomb was a hole hollowed out in the rock and a large stone rolled across the entrance to close it off. When Jesus died, Saturday was a holy day, so no one would go and embalm his body with spices. Sunday morning, Jesus' followers went to the tomb. But when they got there, the stone was rolled back and Jesus' body was not there. Where was his body? Well, if his followers had stolen it, why would they make up a story about Jesus rising from the dead? Many of them were arrested, tortured, imprisoned and killed for preaching Jesus had risen from the dead. The authorities had removed Jesus' body, and when Jesus' followers proclaimed he had risen from the dead, the Romans could simply have brought out his dead body and proved the resurrection story is false. But that never happened. So, where was Jesus? Well, the answer is he had risen from the dead and was seen by many witnesses. That's the Christian message and the Christian hope. You can read it in the Bible, in the book called the Acts of the Apostles, and also at the end of the Gospels written by Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. When Jesus rose from the dead, he defeated death. We say Jesus was victorious. Jesus conquered death. The language is one of victory, and rightly so. During these days, when we hear of people dying due to coronavirus, death can become a cause for concern. And the Christian message of hope is important now more than ever. Easter Sunday is celebrated because Jesus proved that physical death is not the end. Jesus rose from the dead, and that is the message of hope for all who believe in him. Death is not the end, and we will rise again when Jesus returns to join him forever. But for the Christian, there's more to new life than life after death. New life for the Christian starts when they first decide to believe in Jesus and follow him for themselves. Some people say to me, I'm not good enough to be a Christian. I don't lead a good enough life. But that's not what Christianity is about. The truth is none of us are good enough. We all mess up one way or another. None of us are perfect. Even Mother Teresa, for example, wasn't perfect. We all do wrong things, and we call them sins. Because we sin, we die. Because we sin, we are alienated from God. But here is the message of Jesus. When Jesus died on the cross, he took upon himself every bad thing we do, every sin we do, so that we might be free from the effects of sin and reconciled with God. God forgives my sin, and I have a fresh start over with him. That is the new life which begins now. He doesn't have to wait for me to die and rise again with Jesus. The new life begins now, and it changes the way I think and behave. Because that same power of God that raised Jesus from dead is available to me now to help me live this new life following Jesus. Does it all seem a little hard to believe? Well, honestly, before I became a follower of Jesus, I thought the same. But here is the thing. Jesus died and rose again 2,000 years ago. In the meantime, there have been millions and millions of Christians who put their faith and trust in Jesus. Not just as some story they hear, read in the Bible, not just as a good teacher. It's much more than this. As a church pastor, I've taken many funerals. When I talk with Christians as they know their own death approaches, I'm reminded that their hope is faith, is that physical death is not the end. I don't think anyone really looks forward to the moment of death, the passage of this life to the next. But I encounter people who know that their life of faith in Jesus reflects the Jesus they read about in the Bible. The two match up. When they read of Jesus in the Bible, it matches their experience of Jesus in this life. Their faith in Jesus' resurrection is real and not just wishful thinking. So this Easter, when we see an egg, whether it is a chocolate egg or a painted egg, remember that the egg is a symbol of new life. But there is no greater symbol of new life than the empty tomb and the cross of Jesus. Amen. I'm okay, just a sneeze. There's no coronavirus here. Amen. There's no greater symbol of new life than the empty tomb and the cross of Jesus.